Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1189 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today, I'm having a completely delightful conversation with Sari. She is the mother of Jolie, who is 15 now and has had type 1 diabetes for a few years. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you're interested in helping with type 1 diabetes research, but you don't have a lot of time, you can still help at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. All they need you to do, if you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 diabetes, or is the caregiver of someone with type 1 diabetes, all they need you to do is complete the short survey, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Your answers to simple questions will help to move type 1 diabetes forward for you, for your child, and for everyone. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company that's bringing together people who are redefining what it means to live with diabetes. Later in this episode, I'll be speaking with Mark. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 28. He's 47 now. He's going to tell you a little bit about his story. And then at the very end of the episode, you can hear my entire mini interview with Mark. To hear more stories from the Medtronic Champion community or to share your own story, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox and check out the Medtronic Champion hashtag on social media. US Med is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and we've been getting our diabetes supplies from US Med for years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Use the link or the number, get your free benefits check, and get started today with US Med.
I am Sari, and I have a daughter, Jolie, who is almost 15 years old. She was diagnosed 3 years ago. We just celebrated her diaversary on Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
She got home 3 years ago from the ICU on Halloween.
Oh, how did you swing that?
Right. So I was laughing last night because on Halloween 3 years ago, she was sitting in the basement collecting candy or, sorting candy with her best friend as her friends eating all the candy. And we were cooking hot dogs and feeding them to Jolie, cutting them up in small pieces. So it felt like candy because we didn't know what else to do.
Oh, really?
We were like, hot dogs you could eat. We don't have to give you a shot. We knew nothing, even, after 4 days of learning in the ICU while you're exhausted. So last night when her blood sugar was out of control because we were like, it's Halloween, do whatever you want.
Right.
I was like, you know what? Maybe we should have gone back to the hot dogs. That would have been better.
Maybe a ballpark Frank would have been the right way to go here.
Right.
So that's you a handful of days removed from being diagnosed 3 years ago, saying, I want you to have the experience of eating something in this scenario, but we can't let you eat this candy.
Right.
We don't know what to do.
Because we have no idea what we're doing. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? And how did she respond to that? Not well, I imagine.
The hot dogs back then?
Yeah.
Oh, she was fine. I mean, I think she was terrified too, right? So that was so early on that I think she was like, oh yeah, hot dogs are good because then I don't need a shot.
Okay.
So,
oh yeah. Oh, by the way, she was horse trading to get out of the shots probably at that point.
Yeah. I mean, so new and so clueless. And yeah.
It's funny how quickly that goes away. Where we're caring about like the injections or, changing a pump. Isn't it something when you watch people online, they're like, well, I don't want to get a pump because you have to put it on. I always think to myself, I'm like, yeah, like one time every few days you do something for 3 minutes versus what it is. But everyone's scared of everything new at that point. Makes sense.
Yep.
What kind of hot dogs were they? Do you know?
Oh, I don't even remember. I do. So I'm responding to a text from Jolie, Sari, which is something we could talk about. I don't recall what kind of hot dogs they were.
That's okay. I was just looking for a title early on, but it's no big deal.
I don't know.
They weren't
What
cheese dogs.
what are the I can't even think, like the all natural ones that are just not as good as the others, the Applegate or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's all garbage, by the way. If you talk to
They
anybody.
are all horrible.
Yeah.
So I was a vegetarian for a very short time. Very short time. But my rule was I was a vegetarian, but hot dogs didn't count.
How did you become a vegetarian for a short time?
Well, I just decided it wasn't healthy. It wasn't. I have nothing against I'm all wear the leather and eat the animals. But I don't know. I decided it wasn't healthy. It was college, but hot dogs didn't count because hot dogs to me were like a delicacy and weren't real meat anyway. So hot dogs were okay.
I believe it's the scraps from the pig or cow if you get beef hot dogs.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of something. There's a lot of something in it besides salt, like phosphate. I don't want to guess because I don't remember.
I don't know.
I'm getting too old to pull factoids out of my head about hot dogs. Anyway, okay, so she's home. You're hot dogging her on Halloween. What led up to you figuring out she had type 1? Was it in the family or something you saw?
So she has an interesting diagnosis story, or maybe not so interesting. And this was, kind of one of the reasons why I was like, I finally want to come on the podcast because I have this story, which is similar to so many others, but, just interesting. So March 2020, home from school, Jolie's in a mood, crying a lot. I was like, well, all the kids are crying a lot. They're home. They're not seeing their friends. They're trying to do school online. It was horrible. And little by little, we were like, this is the crying, the mood's getting to be a little bit too much. Summer 2020, we would do a lot of hiking or attempt to do a lot of hiking because what else are you doing when there's not a whole lot to do? But we couldn't go anywhere because every time we said we were going to go somewhere, Jolie said, is there a bathroom there? We were like, get over it. If you need a tree, there's a tree. Like bathrooms aren't open places. And she wouldn't go places because there weren't bathrooms. And we couldn't figure out like what her obsession was with bathrooms. Mm-hmm. And she was crying constantly to the point where we started talking to the doctors about some medication for depression, just figuring out what was going on. So through the summer, still going on. I mean, we were going to the doctor so many times. Her ears hurt her. Her legs hurt her. She felt like she couldn't walk up the steps. Nothing. Finally, we went to the doctor, I want to say like the end of the summer, and she had lost a lot of weight. And our pediatrician said, go ahead, when on the way home, go and buy some Ensure because we need to bulk her up a little bit. Left. I stopped at the supermarket because I stupidly then listened to pediatricians and bought the Ensure. I got home. So my husband, who's the one who has to buy the Applegate hot dogs, saw the Ensure and said, absolutely not. We will not give her that poison. Which little did I know, it really would have been.
It would have been tough on her for sure.
Right. It would have been poison to her. Yeah. So we threw out the Ensure, didn't give it to her. We were like, okay, so what do we've got to bulk her up. Why is she losing weight?
If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes, because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information. I used to hate ordering my daughter's diabetes supplies. I never had a good experience, and it was frustrating. But it hasn't been that way for a while, actually for about 3 years now, because that's how long we've been using US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. US Med is the #1 distributor for Freestyle Libre systems nationwide. They are the #1 specialty distributor for Omnipod DASH, the #1 fastest growing tandem distributor nationwide, the #1 rated distributor in Dexcom customer satisfaction surveys. They have served over 1 million people with diabetes since 1996. and they always provide 90 days worth of supplies and fast and free shipping. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Libre 3 and Dexcom G7. They accept Medicare nationwide and over 800 private insurers. Find out why US Med has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau at usmed.com/juicebox, or just call them at 888-721-1514. Get started right now, and you'll be getting your supplies the same way we do.
Yeah, I finally said to the pediatrician, we need to do something else. We were about to have an appointment to talk about medication for depression because I was not sleeping at all. She was just crying all the time. It was so much stress. So I think it was like a Friday, we had the appointment with the pediatrician. On Wednesday, I called the pediatrician and I said, can we just do a full blood workup? This was Wednesday, October 27th. Mm-hmm. This is, again, time out, rewind, big rewind. So in April of 2020, do you remember all those articles and stuff that they would talk about COVID toes?
COVID toes?
Do you remember COVID toes?
I don't remember COVID toes.
Look up COVID toes.
I am.
So it was like a kid thing. So April of 2020, we had a virtual visit with the pediatrician because Jolie had blisters covering her toes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a thing. So blisters covering her toes, but we did that virtual visit showing the pediatrician, through our phone, the blisters on her toes, which she could not see.
I had a phone doctor's appointment where they're like, hold it closer, hold it closer.
Right. Ridiculous. The COVID toes were a thing. And the doctor's like, yeah, that's the thing. Like she might have COVID, she might not, but we weren't testing for COVID then. So who knows? So that was kind of an aside that put it in the back of your mind.
Oh, by the way, American Academy of Dermatology, along with the swelling and discoloration, COVID toes can also cause blisters, itch, or pain. Some people develop pain, raised bumps, or areas of rough skin.
Right.
Okay.
So that was on top of everything else. And Jolie has always been like the boy who cried wolf. So we were like, get over yourself. Like, stop with the complaining. Every single thing was a complaint. Now, back to October 27th, I said to the doctor before we have this appointment about medication, can we please do a full blood workup? And the doctor said, that is not necessary. We do not need to do that. And I finally said, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, we're going to do a full blood workup before we decide to put my child on medication for depression. Full blood workup.
Was this a situation where I have a daughter, and a wife? Was this the situation where it was like, oh, this is a lady problem? She's sad or something like that? Was he leaning like that? No. And female pediatrician. No, okay. She was just like, oh, she's going through things. She's lost weight because she's depressed. She's sad because she's depressed. Everything was like diabetes, never on my radar. So that was never something I even thought to ask about. But luckily, we did the blood workup Wednesday afternoon. We took her into the pediatrician, to the hospital for a blood workup as a reward for doing so well during the blood workup, because I think she was really out of it at that point. We went to McDonald's and got her a Sprite and whatever other junk, because we were like, thank you so much. You did such a good job doing blood. And then at 11:30 at night, and at that, back in the day, I didn't sleep with my phone anywhere near me. 11:30 at night, apparently the doctor had been trying to call every phone in our house. Finally got through to my husband's cell phone. And at that point, Jolie was actually sleeping, which she was not doing a lot of, probably because she was so out of it. Yeah. And the doctor said to Jim, you need to rush her to the Children's Hospital emergency room. Jim turned to me and said, Jolie needs to go to the emergency room. Her blood sugar is at 750. And I was like, just tell them that she's sleeping and ask them if we could wait till the morning. Because again, I had no idea what that meant. You don't know what you're talking about, yeah.
I had no idea what that meant. And Jim was like, no, we're not waiting till the morning. She needs to be taken now. Jumped up, packed enough bags. I had enough wherewithal to pack some blankets and her stuffed animals. I was like, if they're calling us at 11:30 at night, maybe we're going to be sleeping there for a night. I didn't know it was going to be 3 nights.
Yeah.
So off we go to the emergency room. And at that time, nothing was open. And it was crazy because we got to the Children's Hospital in Boston emergency room pretty quickly. They took her immediately. Obviously the doctor said, we're calling to let them know that you're on your way. They took her right away. And I want to say within 3 minutes, they had an IV in her arm. And I was like, what's happening? Is this serious? I still had no idea what was going on. I was like, this seems kind of serious.
Right.
Somebody I know from the town we live in was actually the ER doctor on call then, random coincidence. And I was like, he said something about diabetes. I was like, are you telling me she has diabetes? And he said, well, I can't tell you that yet, but it seems pretty likely. And I still didn't understand why, I didn't know that 750 blood sugar would mean that.
Right.
they said, so eventually, yes, has diabetes. She was in DKA, which to this day, I still don't really know how you determine if somebody's in DKA.
Blood gases, other things like that.
Acidity of blood. They were talking things that, again, I was so delirious at that point. I don't even know half of it. I was writing notes that I look back at my notes. Can't even read them. Mm-hmm. So straight to the ICU, and there we were.
How about that? Well, you actually saved her by demanding the blood test, though.
Yeah.
But you were demanding it because you didn't want to put her on an SSRI if she didn't need it.
I just wanted to see if there was something we were missing. Yeah, I just didn't know. And then, I think the pediatrician called us the second day in the hospital, and I said to her, good thing I asked you for the blood work. And she said, oh, we would have gotten to that. And I said, maybe when she was in a coma? When would we have gotten to that?
Yeah. We would have tried the medicine for a month. And then when it didn't make her happy, then I might have wondered what was going on. She covered her ass, did she? That's nice.
Yeah, she's not our pediatrician anymore.
I watched a doctor try to cover their butt in a ER 2 weekends ago when I had to fly across the country. So because Arden wasn't feeling well and not diabetes related, maybe similar to you and your husband was like, get up, we have to go to the hospital. I was like making a plane reservation at 2 a.m. thinking we didn't have to have kids. I was like, what are we doing? On a plane at 7 a.m. I had been awake for like some 30 hours by the time the plane, because I wasn't planning on going anywhere, and at midnight, she's like, hey, I don't think I'm okay. And we started talking, and like I assessed her over the phone, sent her to the ER. And then I'm like, well, I got to go. I got to jump on a plane because this isn't getting fixed. She had just left the ER like a day before and they didn't help her. So like young girl in the ER, pain they couldn't put their finger on. So they started telling her like, this could be in your head. That's why I asked about the girl thing. It's it sucks. But even when you talk to, like, I was talking to Arden's OBGYN the other day, because that's the route we're going to go next, looking for what her issue was. This is a board certified woman, who deals with women's issues. And she even said, sometimes with girls, it just goes away.
Oh, no.
And I was like, okay.
So it wasn't her appendix?
It was not her appendix.
Oh, goodness.
Wasn't her gallbladder. Wasn't anything they could find. But you had to beat them over the head the entire way to get them to look. So we're not going to give her that test. I'm like, why not? I said, everything points to that being a sincere possibility. Yes. Well, yeah, but we're not going to test for that. I said, it's an ultrasound. What do you mean? Just check her gallbladder while we're here. Like that kind of stuff. Anyway, I had a terrible experience that I've ranted about in another episode, so I won't bother telling you about it. But okay, so you got rid of your pediatrician. Was she younger or older, the pediatrician? Or not?
Middle-aged.
Really, not one or the other even. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, people love her.
Well, yeah, their kids haven't actually been sick.
Right. And, I will say that we kept her for a while until she did something else that we didn't like to my other daughter, actually. And I kept her on because I said, you know what? She's a bridge. We're not using her for any medical advice. We're not using her for any direct help. She's my bridge to every other doctor. So that was kind of how I was using her as the bridge. I would call her, and I think she was almost scared of me at that point. And I'd say, I need a referral here, or you're going to send me to this doctor. And she would say, okay.
Yeah.
So we got whatever we wanted from her until finally I said, I'm not dealing with her anymore.
Do you mind? And you don't have to, of course, but like, can you give me a brief overview of what happened with your other child that made you finally leave?
I think I don't think this is an exaggeration, but she violated HIPAA rules. She spoke to somebody who I didn't want her to speak to about my daughter.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
I had a school nurse who on their own called Arden's doctor one time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I bet you that person's never done that ever again to anybody.
Yeah.
So I didn't need the phone. I was yelling so loud at her. I think she could have heard me across town, maybe.
My yelling was through the portal in all caps. I was like, You didn't just talk to her, did you?
Yeah. I think I started that conversation. What the fuck do you think you're doing? And it degraded from there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I was just wondering. I was like, oh, were you? I don't give a shit what you want.
Yeah, I thought I was helping. No, you were not helping.
Yeah. Maybe don't think so much. That might be your problem. I was so upset. Anyway, okay. So, well, that's a tough experience. New pediatrician better?
You know what? The funny thing is, I actually haven't met the new pediatrician yet. My husband's met her once. We've got a well visit for Jolie coming up in next week.
Oh,
So I'll meet her for the first time.
cool. Okay. So Jolie's home. She's got diabetes. You're tossing hot dogs at her like she's a seal at the circus. And what happens next? Like, where does it all go from there?
Well, the funny thing is because of the timing. So now in the school district that we were in, so this is, now November 2020, they were in school every other week. So 1 week was virtual, 1 week was in person.
Oh.
And they did that because they had kind of like two cohorts. They split the grade in half.
I thought your school district figured out which week COVID was a problem, but okay,
right,
I got it.
Right. So they split the grade in half, so there weren't as many kids in school at one time.
That makes sense, yeah.
She was diagnosed during a home week. So when she was in the hospital Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, she was actually on her iPad attempting to do some work. And then on Monday, Halloween was on a Saturday that year. Monday, I was like, you're going back to school. What are you going to do? So it's like, this is your life. You need to push forward and do it. So, it's funny. I hear some people say like they kept their kids home for 3 weeks to figure it all out. I was not in that school. I was like, you're going back, you're getting back to life. So, she went back on Monday and amazingly, she did not miss any school.
Once she's through the DKA, do you have hindsight? Do you look back and go, oh, the sadness, the crying, the peeing, like, do you put it all together?
Oh, yeah. I was like, no wonder why she was sad and all out of sorts and her legs wouldn't move.
How long was that going on for?
I mean, it was definitely since the beginning of the summer.
Okay.
Diagnosed in October.
Okay. Yeah, geez. Well, a very slow onset. 4 months, maybe. Does she have any clarity about it looking back? Like, do you know what I mean? Did she say, has she ever said something like, I should have said this to you differently, or you weren't listening to me? Was she mad at you, or?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't know. I haven't asked her about that, but I don't think so.
Well, I was just wondering if it came up. That's all. Because it's, how would you know, first of all?
Right.
But at the same time, if you're that young, you might be like, look, I came to you and said I didn't feel well. And you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. The why gets lost all the time. Your doctor missed the why, like, I don't want to go anywhere without a bathroom. I mean, that's a pretty weird change for a person who hasn't had that issue for 12 years, right? So you didn't say why, you just said, don't be silly, like that kind of thing. Get
over it and pee in a tree or something. But yeah, I mean, she still is kind of the boy who cried wolf, but now we take everything seriously. And we have since discovered so many other odd things that she's got going on, whether they're connected or not, who knows? But
I just jotted down pee in a tree, but tell me about those other things. Just in case.
She ended up in the emergency room. I don't even remember when it was, the end of last year, with a pilonidal cyst.
Yeah.
So now she was diagnosed with pilonidal disease.
Why is that interesting to me?
From the pilonidal.
Sarah, hold on 1 second. Why is that interesting to me? Oh, my sister-in-law had one of those.
Horrible.
No, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying my wife has hypothyroid, probably Hashimoto's. My daughter has type 1. My son has Hashimoto's. And my sister-in-law had a pilonidal cyst. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Coming together, right?
The cyst, they remove it?
So it was interesting. That was another one. I was like, did you fall down? Did you hurt yourself? She's a volleyball player. I was like, you must have fallen playing volleyball. You just have a bruise on the bottom of your tailbone. Get over it. Finally, she was in so much pain that we took her to the ER and they were like, all the nurses were like, oh my God, those are the most painful things ever. So yes, they drained it, I guess, which relieved the pain right away after more pain. And then now there's a pilonidal clinic at Children's Hospital Boston, amazingly enough. So now she's a patient at the pilonidal clinic. So they need to, so many weird terms. They do pit picking. So I guess a pilonidal cyst forms from dirt getting into the hair follicles around your butt area. So they have to pick the pits, which means they kind of dig out the hair follicle and then stitch them up.
Cyst is an unusual pocket in the skin that usually contains hair and skin debris. The cyst is almost always near the tailbone at the top of the buttocks. Pilonidal cyst usually occurs when hair punctures the skin and then becomes embedded.
Right. So in order to avoid more pilonidal cysts, they need to
pop them out and then close it up.
Pit these picks. Or pick the pits. I don't even know. So they did a whole bunch of stitches in her butt crack. And now she gets laser hair removal covered by insurance. I was like, you are the luckiest teenage girl around. You get laser hair removal. So then on top of that, then they discovered that she had, and I'm going to say this wrong, hydrodentitis?
Whoa. Hydrogentitis.
Hydrodentitis.
I got it. Supportative? Have you ever heard that?
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah, because the doctors call it HS.
Also called acne inverse, is a chronic inflammatory skin condition with lesions including deep-seated nodules and abscesses, draining tracts, and fibrotic scars. These lesions mostly commonly occur in the interregionous
bikini line and armpits.
Thank you. Areas rich in apocrine glands.
So now she could get her bikini line and her armpits lasered by Boston Children's Hospital, just covered by insurance. I'm like, you are really the luckiest teenage girl around. So
they'll thread my eyebrows for me while you're there.
Really?
Really. Hey, listen, what's your background? Like, I don't know, where are you guys from?
I am a New Yorker.
No, I mean, like originally.
Nothing exciting. We're Jewish, we're Eastern European, or
nothing I mean, not. I just wanted to know if there was something there that like they see this and I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were hairier or something like that. I didn't know what to say.
I mean, I've had laser hair removal, more than most. So maybe, but
interesting.
I don't know. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So I've asked a couple of times, are they, is any of that considered autoimmune? I think, there's been questions about pilonidal and hydrodentitis, if I'm saying it right, being connected to autoimmune. Some say yes, some say no. But yeah, lucky her, all this stuff.
Well, that's crazy. Did I hear you mention anything else autoimmune? Was there one other thing or no? Is that it?
With Jolie, no.
No, okay. How about in the family? Are there other autoimmune issues?
So my father has MS. I know that's kind of questionable, being autoimmune or not. My husband's mother, we think, had lupus.
Okay.
I have been told I have Raynaud's. You've
been told because your hands are cold?
Well, because I've gone to doctors, and I mean, they don't really do much about it. It's not extreme, but yeah, you saw when I had my scarf on. I'm cold all the time.
All the time. Your thyroid's okay?
My thyroid is okay.
Yeah. Your TSH is like under 2.
I don't, I never paid attention to that. I guess next time I get blood work done, I will. Jolie's thyroid at her endo appointment just a couple of months ago was 3.4, and they don't want to do anything about it. Had some back and forth conversations with them, and they said with 0 symptoms, they don't want to look further. We'll keep an eye on it, I guess.
That's interesting. Okay. So you went to the doctor and you said, what, I'm cold all the time. And they said, oh, that's Raynaud's, and then go away.
Well, I had some like lesion type things on my feet that they had to check out. And then, then they sent me to the rheumatologist, and they were like, yeah, you probably have Raynaud's, and there's really not much to do about it now. Wear gloves. Wear gloves and warm socks.
Arden was, she was somewhere one day, and we were talking about maybe how she's kind of like a little flexible, like too flexible. And I forget now, I'm forgetting the name of the autoimmune disease that's around that. And the doctor goes all into what it is. And he's talking about it like she's like it's a science experiment. He's like, oh, that's interesting. That could be blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, don't worry about it, though. There's nothing they can do about that. We're like, thank you. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Okay. So in your notes, you say that after her diagnosis, you found the podcast pretty quickly. How did that happen? Right now, we're going to hear from a member of the Medtronic Champion community. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. And this is Mark.
I used injections for about 6 months, and then my endocrinologist in the Navy recommended a pump.
How long had you been in the Navy?
8 years up to that point.
I've interviewed a number of people who have been diagnosed during service, and most of the time they're discharged. What happened to you?
I was medically discharged. 6 months after my diagnosis.
Was it your goal to stay in the Navy for your whole life, your career?
It was. Yeah. In fact, I think a few months before my diagnosis, my wife and I had that discussion about, staying in for the long term. And, we'd made the decision despite all the hardships and time away from home. That was what we loved the most.
Was the Navy a lifetime goal of yours?
Lifetime goal. I mean, as my earliest childhood memories were flying, being a fighter pilot.
How did your diagnosis impact your lifelong dream?
It was devastating. Everything I had done in life, everything I'd worked up to that point was just taken away in an instant. I was not prepared for that at all.
What does your support system look like?
Friends, your family, caregivers, for me, the Medtronic Champions community, all those resources that are out there help guide the way, but then help keep abreast on, the new things that are coming down the pipe and to give you hope for eventually that we can find a cure.
Stick around at the end of this episode to hear my entire conversation with Mark. And you can hear more stories from Medtronic Champions and share your own story at medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox.
So I might have actually been in the hospital. So I'm a podcast fan, have been a podcast fan for a while. And in 2020, I had a podcast that I listened to regularly just of like learning about what's going on in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think when I was in the hospital, I was like, there's got to be a podcast about diabetes. So I listened to the podcast for a while before I even got onto the Facebook group. And I think the time that I was listening to the podcast, maybe now you are too. I just don't listen. I don't hear that as much, but there was a lot of, don't forget to join our Facebook group. And I was like, I have enough Facebook stuff. I don't need to be on social media more. And then finally I was like, I should probably join that Facebook group. And I think it probably around January, I got on the Facebook group.
Okay. You find it valuable?
I do. Early on, I definitely used it as like a help me. Started maybe feeling a little bit self-conscious about how many times I was saying, help me. And then it just felt like more of a support group and people who understand.
It modifies itself as you use it. And I do mention it. It's funny. There's a person I know who they professionally help people drive more traffic to websites. They do these kinds of things. And she tells me privately all the time, you have this podcast that so many people listen to, and you never talk about the things you want people to do. Like the Facebook group, you never tell them about your website. She's like, your ads work for everybody. They'd work for you too. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I make a note to myself on this whiteboard in front of me. And then inevitably a week from now, I'll scrub it off. And then I'll be putting bumpers on the podcast and I'll completely forget to do that. There is a Facebook group. It's terrific. And you should go find it.
It is. It's funny because I feel like I have friends on the Facebook group who I don't know at all, but I just feel connected to them. And, just the people who you communicate with on a regular basis or see their posts and get excited about, their things that are happening or their weight loss journeys or the new things that are happening. It's exciting to feel that kind of connection to somebody.
I did an in-person thing last weekend and I spent like the first 20 minutes hugging people. I was there with Jenny and I don't know what got into our head. I was like, let's walk outside and talk about what we're going to do because I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but we don't really need to plan for when you know something this well, you don't need to plan to do it. You know what I mean? But we were going to talk about kind of how we were going to start into it. And for some reason we walked outside of the hall and it turned into a receiving line at a wedding. and I just leaned over to Jenny at one point and I was like, we made a mistake coming out here. And she's like, I'm like, we're never going to get to talk about what we want to talk about. But you see the people and then you can picture them in this little picture on your phone. And you're like, oh my God, I know you. And then, people are hugging and it's really lovely. Anyway, I'm sure some people hear that and think that sounds horrible. I do not want to be a part of that, but it really is unlike most experiences on Facebook, I find. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that the summer after Julie's diagnosis, I think I mentioned she went to sleepaway camp. She's always gone to an overnight camp, and she was very set on going to the same camp that she's always gone to. Mm-hmm. And we had heard diabetes camp is great. You need to do this. And she was like, no, why do I want to go to camp where my friends don't go? She's, I'm going back to the camp that I've always gone to. So we spoke to camp. They were wonderful about it. And it was that summer that I think I got really much more involved in learning more from the podcast, learning more from the Facebook group, because, she was away from me and she was living at 300 for a very long time at camp and, trying to manage her from afar and talking to other people about how to manage her. And that's when I was like, no, 300 is not okay. We can't do that. And, that's when I started learning that a lot of people think well, as long as she's not low, that's okay. 300 is fine as long as she's not low. And, so I just started learning and teaching myself and figuring out how we could make things work a little bit better for her.
So was that a full year of you living like that before she went away to camp?
No, she wasn't living at 300.
No, but with the knowledge you had, that was from October till the summertime. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Yep.
And then was there something about being away from her for a little while that gave you maybe the air to look into it?
I think that was when I realized that was when her numbers were high for too long,
Okay.
and I realized she was high for too long. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happens at camp when, she's gone back to camp a lot more, and that it happens. But now we know how to bring her back down and deal with it. Camp food is not healthy food, probably similar to college dorm food. It's not pretty. You could say you're going to have a salad with chickpeas, and for some reason that hits as if she's had a full pizza. But and also, as I don't really know what she's eating when she's not with me. She's very easy to control when she's home, but when she's away, I don't really know all the details, and she doesn't always want to share all the details.
Right. It's possible she has a cupcake in her hand and she's going, "It's a salad with chickpeas."
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was when I first realized, like, okay, what's happening now is not okay. And we need to figure this out. And I need to teach other people that this is not okay. And,
right.
A little bit more learning across the board.
Is your husband involved in all this with the diabetes?
He's involved in a, like, what can I do? How can I support? But he does not have the knowledge that I have. He does not listen to the podcast. He does not know the details.
This is apropos of nothing, but you didn't meet a Jewish guy named Jim. So, right? That doesn't happen, does it?
I did meet a Jewish guy named Jim.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Good for you. I don't know where you get it. Yeah, that threw me off. Like, immediately I was like, he can't be Jewish. His name is Jim.
I know. Odd.
You ever question his parents?
Yeah. Yeah. For a lot of things. Yes.
Sorry. I don't think most people would have picked up on that, but I have a special talent. So anyway, I was like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
It doesn't.
Not a Brad, an Adam, nothing.
Eric, David, right?
I mean, there's a lot of options. Nevertheless. Okay. So a boy named Jim. I wish this was about him because I think that's the title, but we can't go that direction.
Well, so when I was introduced to Jim, the friend that introduced us totally has nothing to do with anything. I said to her, we went on, I don't know if it was our first date or something. Somehow I ended up at his house for some reason. He was making dinner or whatever, and he had a Christmas tree up. And I called my friend and I said, "You just introduced me to a guy who has a dog and a Christmas tree. I hate dogs. I'm not interested in the guy with the Christmas tree." And she was like, don't worry. No, he just likes Christmas trees, but he's actually Jewish. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
This is tracking.
So once Jim and I, established a relationship, I was like, so the Christmas tree's going to go. And I guess the dog, he was like, no, the dog's not going. And I was like, I'll learn to live with the dog. So it was.
But I'm not watching The Grinch next year, if that's what you're wondering.
Right.
Podcast helpful management stuff mostly in the beginning, or did you just dive in with everything?
I think the management stuff was probably the most helpful at the beginning. And again, 3 years ago now, I don't remember how I started, but I remember definitely when Jolie was at camp, I was all about the pro tips and all that of like, okay, how do we figure this all out? And working with the school nurses who I actually don't work with at all, especially now. Jolie has nothing to do with the nurses, which was a little bit of a point of contention with her going into high school this year. But just trying to make sure that I know what I'm doing that's best for her, to try and teach her what's best for her.
Yeah. So you tried to separate her from the nursing staff at the school and they pushed back? Yeah.
So in middle school, the nurses followed her Dexcom, and that was pretty much all they did. I told them they were not to reach out to her for any reason. They were not to call her down to the office for anything. There was a couple of times where they would reach out to me and say, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, we're taking care of it," because Jolie and I text all day long. So finally I said to them, "Do you still need to follow her?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we want to follow her." And I didn't want to get into it, but it was, I think even on the Facebook group, I asked somebody about it and they were like, "Well, if she didn't have a Dexcom, they wouldn't be following her." But I let them follow her through middle school. And then going into high school, when I met the nurses, they said, "So we're going to want to follow her Dexcom." And I said, "But you're not going to." And they said, "Oh, well, we require that we can, insist that we follow the Dexcoms of all of our kids with diabetes." And I said, "But you're not going to follow Jolie." And I said, because, and I used that. I said, if she didn't have a Dexcom, you wouldn't be able to follow her. She's fine. And they said, "Oh, well, then if we're not following her, we do need to know that for the first 2 weeks of school." So keep in mind, this a new school. She's a freshman.
Yeah.
The first 2 weeks of school, she needs to come to the nurse's office. A huge, huge school. Our school has over 1,600 kids in it. for the first 2 weeks of school, she needs to come to the nurse's office every day before lunch to check in with us. And I said, no, she's not going to do that. And they said, well, it's something that we ask of all of our kids. And I said, but she's not going to do that. I said, the reason she's not doing that is because she wants a normal high school career. There's no reason that she needs to go and check in with you. You're not following her. You're not going to ask her anything. There's nothing for you to do.
Yeah. What'll happen when she gets there? You guys going to wave at each other and then what?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it worked. The pushback worked. So they don't follow her. She does not stop in to see them. Funny thing is this year, she's actually visited the nurse more than she ever did in middle school because one day her high school's been a challenge with diabetes and food. I say that high school is a candy culture. She has been high a lot, or at least been using a ton of insulin a lot. Mm-hmm. So one day her pod ran out of insulin. So she was like, what do I do? And I said, you go to the nurse and you change your pod. I brought them a bucket of stuff. So she has supplies there. And she said, no, I'll just be fine. I won't eat all day. I said, well, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And she said, no, it doesn't. And then she had a volleyball game at night. And she said, just bring me a pen when you come to the volleyball game. I said, again, it doesn't work that way. You need to have your basal running. You need to have other things happening. We can't just bring you a pen if you're going to give yourself a shot with a pen, which she doesn't even know how to do.
Yeah.
I said, you could just change your pod. You could do that quicker. Long story short, she ended up going to the nurse and changing her pod. I think she got scared enough that she just did it. But
I just finished a recording with a young girl, she's like 25. She's type 1. She was having a perfect pregnancy. It was going perfectly. And at 33 weeks, she got the flu. And a couple days into the flu, she changed her, I think, a T-Slim pump. And her cannula got kinked. And not 7 or 8 hours after that happened, she was in emergency surgery. They were trying to save her baby.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, because she didn't have insulin for 7 hours. And probably had some, but not enough for 7 hours. She went into DK that quickly. And the baby was in DK too.
Oh, my God, really?
Yeah,
oh, that's scary.
Yeah. So baby's okay. But really, she said one of the last things she remembers is the doctor saying, I'm sorry, this is going to hurt. We're trying to save you and the baby.
Oh.
And that was that's one of the last things she remembers happening before the surgery. Anyway, point is, you can't go hours and hours and hours without insulin.
No, you can't. So she did end up going to change her pod. So she was like, all right, I went to the nurse. Now I know where my stuff is. I was like, see, they're not that scary. I didn't want her to think the nurse. I don't want her to feel like she has to use the nurse, but I also don't want her to think the nurse is scary.
No, I understand. It's also super interesting that you're fighting against the thing that most people can't get their schools to do, and they desperately want them to do. Just follow them on Dexcom. Most schools are like, we don't want to be responsible for that.
Right.
And you had a school who was like, we have to follow your kid on, isn't it? It's so...
I mean, I think it's, for me, because I follow her so closely and because I communicate with her so regularly, I do feel like it's a bit of an invasion of privacy. And it's funny because I wonder, I don't know if Jolie's gotten to that point yet for me. Sometimes I wonder, does she think it's an invasion of her privacy that I know everything that's going on with her? I feel like...
she will eventually, don't worry. Yeah.
I mean, I very often get the text of, I got it. That's the standard text. I got it. Leave me alone. I've got it. I know what I'm doing. I've got it. So I know that she's annoyed by my reaching out. I just don't know if she feels like it's an invasion of privacy yet. But
I would remind her that she thought it was okay to go from 1 o'clock till 7 o'clock without insulin, and then maybe she doesn't got it as much as she thinks she does.
She doesn't ever got it. She doesn't ever got it, but she thinks she's got it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, high school's been challenging. It definitely has been challenging.
Yeah, good luck. I don't think it gets any better.
Right.
So I was going to say something about my wife, but I don't think that's okay. So anyway, I don't think it ever gets better is what I was going to say. And I'm sure I'm the same pain in the ass that I was when I was 16 as well. Not to say otherwise. I don't know what you do other than teach them, remind them, repeat it, wait for it to sink in, and just hope that learning doesn't have to come through a horrible problem. That's a really, hopefully that works that way.
I mean, to your point of what we don't want, what most people do want, interesting story. Last year, Jolie was going on a field trip to some amusement park, and the field trip was divided by the clusters that they're in middle school. They were going by cluster, and each bus had a cluster or something like that. Mm-hmm. And Jolie came home from school one day crying that she got put on a different bus because she needed to be on the bus with the nurse.
Yeah. That
didn't go over well with me. That did not, I mean, I pulled over, called the nurse, or called the assistant principal. I was like, what? Jolie just told me she's on a different bus. Why is she not on the bus with everybody else in her cluster? And she said, she needs to be on the bus with the other diabetics. And I know there's different thoughts in the diabetes community about terminology, but I was very quickly to say, we don't label our children. Please, are you talking about the children with diabetes? I mean, I was just on fire at that point. I was like, don't tell me she needs to be on the bus with the other diabetics. And for what reason? They said, well, if there's an issue. I said, if there's an issue, that nurse is doing nothing. What are you talking about? They'd pull over just like you'd pull over a bus without a nurse. Mm-hmm. It didn't go over well. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate their attention to wanting to take care of their children with diabetes. But, I feel like there's a point where.
Well, I take your point. So a couple of them actually about the, this is private. I think that as well. Like, Arden, at that point, when Arden went into high school was not our problem. The high school nurses, we had them pretty beat down by then. Like the nursing staff was pretty amenable by then. For her, it was the middle school situation with the nurse who was like, this is what has to happen. This is what I do with all the kids. She and I are going to become friends. Arden looked across a meeting table at me like, I'm not going to become friends with this lady. And I was like, right, like she just wasn't interested in it. And I just said to her, I'm like, look, however old you are going into middle school, I was like, Arden's had diabetes for, a decade at this point. And she's like, And I said, we haven't known you the whole time and she's fine. So we're going to be okay. I appreciate.
She hasn't been friends with you before now and she's not going to be friends with you after now.
Yeah. I said, I'm so sorry. The worst thing I can think of is that my daughter spends an inordinate amount of time in the nurse's office befriending a 50-year-old lady. I was like, I don't think that's actually a good thing. And so, I was like, no, thank you. Really appreciate it. Like, seriously. But here's what we're going to do. Arden and I are going to handle this through texting. And the good news is that if she drops dead, it's my fault, not yours. And you should have seen the legal person in the room lit up like it was Christmas Day. And you could see her go, oh, that's a good point. Like, we're out of this if we just do it this way.
Right.
Like they literally, once they realized they were giving away legal responsibility, they were thrilled to do it. And that was it. So I think Arden had been in that nurse's office maybe 4 times, but always for like a pump change or like something like that.
I mean, I appreciate the nurses. I appreciate that they are there. I appreciate they seem to be on top of things. Her school has 10 kids with diabetes right now. So, they seem to be somewhat knowledgeable, but I don't need them to manage her at all. They don't need to call her classroom and say your blood sugar's high or your blood sugar's low. She knows that, so I feel much better without them.
I had one tell me once, a lot of our kids get their best diabetes care here. And I thought, well, that's a different problem. That's not a good thing about you. That's a different issue.
It's a home life issue, right?
Yeah. Because you've got the kids running around in the high 200s going like, at least they're not low. And, I'm like, and that's the best care they're getting. Like you've set the bar pretty low if that's what you want to like put on your CV is what I was thinking. Yes. So anyway, I take your point, and I like that you stick up for it and you're consistent about it, and everything else. Did she get on the regular bus for the trip back?
No, she had to be on that bus with the diabetic children. Yep, the
diabetes bus.
No, just with the diabetic children. Yes.
Yeah, but if we say diabetes bus, I can make that the title of the episode.
Oh, you can. Yep. She was on the diabetes bus. So I feel like for so many things, I'm like on my soapbox, and I have to, I'm always like calling people and sticking up for what should be happening. And then I feel like I always step back and be like, oh my God, everybody hates me. Everybody hates me. Like I get so confident, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not that confident.
But do you dig back into whether or not you think Jolie's upset with you being involved? Do you think she's good with you doing this stuff?
Yeah, she is, and there are some things I still do behind the scenes without her necessarily knowing. Like, I have like a 1-pager information that I send to all of her coaches. I send a 1-pager that I send to, all the camp nurses, and 1-pager if the school wants to give it to her teachers. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that she knows that I do that for all of those things. She knows that I have conversations with people, but I think she appreciates it. She said, I don't remember what it was. There was something recently, maybe it was tryouts for something where she said, you're going to tell, no, she's getting her lifeguarding certification soon. And she said, well, you're going to tell them that I'm going to need a break sometimes, if I feel like I need a break. And I said, yeah, of course. So I think she's also gotten to the point where she knows I'm going to go and tell people that what's going on. I don't know if she knows what I give them or how much I tell them, but yeah, I think she does appreciate it.
Well, cool. Hopefully she won't need a break while someone's drowning.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
I'll be right with you. I'm going to drink this juice box, wait a couple of minutes.
Right. Need a little time.
And get right in there and help you. You should just paddle. Kick your feet. Oh my God. Well, that's cool. She does a lot of stuff. She plays a bunch of sports?
She plays volleyball. I mean, that's her main sport now. And she's always been a swimmer. She actually, when she was diagnosed, she was on the swim team, and literally like 4 days after diagnosis, she went back to swim team again, because I was very much of like, you're doing what you're doing. Yeah. So but then swim team wasn't her thing anymore. And swim team was hard for management, and that wasn't why we left it, but
she just wasn't interested in swimming anymore. Gotcha.
But lifeguarding makes a lot of money, and she has discovered that she wants to have nice things. So she wants to be a lifeguard so she can make money.
That's excellent. And she's 15. She knows she's settled in on like doing some work. That's really great. Seriously.
Well, she's settled in on me not buying her everything that she wants. So she needs to figure out a way to do it.
You were like, I'm not paying for that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
My son's been at his first job out of college for 10 months now. And a package arrived here yesterday. And he goes, hey, he FaceTimes me. He goes, where are you at? I was like, I was in the car. By the way, I don't know why kids don't call. Like, I don't know why everything has to be a FaceTime. Like driving, he's looking at the ceiling of my car while I'm driving. And he's like, where are you at? I said, I'm out picking up something for mom. And he goes, well, when you get home, call me back. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I get home and I do a couple things. And I'm actually thinking I'm going to call Cole back in a second. He calls me back. And I'm like, what is this? And so he's like, go to the front door. There's a package there. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go to the front door and there's 2 packages and they seem very similar. And like there's clothing inside of them. And I said, I have them. It feels like clothing. I said, they're addressed to you. He goes, yeah, one of them's for you. One of them's for me. And I was like, oh, okay. And I opened it up and he bought me an Eagles jersey.
Oh.
He's never bought me anything ever. And I was like, I was very grateful and I expressed that to him. But at the same time, I tried not to make a big deal out of it. But I was thinking, I'm like, oh my God, you used your money and you bought me something. I was like, this is a lovely moment. He's never bought me anything.
That is really nice.
I think he was proud to be able to pay for it himself.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. So anyway, that's what it made me think of when I hear Jolie's out there hustling to make her money.
Yeah. Let's say.
Because she needs what? Shoes? That's what Arden would buy. Shoes or clothes.
I don't know, bags, shoes, headphones. She decided that there's like a $600 pair of headphones that she wants that I'm like, no,
I'm not doing that.
No.
Yeah. Go pull little kids out of the pool. I'm not. I'm not in.
Yeah, she put together a Google slideshow of what she wants for her birthday, which is next week. And I was like, no.
Arden de-stresses at college by online shopping, and she doesn't buy anything. She just goes online and shops. She said it's very relaxing, and I'm like,
pretend shops.
Okay. In your notes here, you talk about Omnipod 5. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, as I said, maybe I didn't say, but as you maybe can tell, I'm a bit of a fierce advocate and don't hold back. So yeah, we got her the 5 June 22.
Very quickly.
So yeah,
wow.
Was not easy, but I wanted her to have it before she went to camp. So she was on the DASH starting December after diagnosis. So 2 months post-diagnosis, we got her on the DASH. So that was December 2020. And then she got the 5 in June, right after it came out.
It felt important to you because she was going away. You thought, well, maybe this will alleviate some of the spikes if she misses stuff like that.
I thought it could help out with some camp management, which I think it does a little bit, but
you still have to bolus, but still Arden's at college and Arden's biggest problems with diabetes still are it's her time and attention, which I think is true for everybody. She's not pre-bolusing long enough. And if she sees a spike, she doesn't jump on it. Those are her 2 issues. If she did that, Arden would be back with a high 5 A1C. But she just
And I will say, I think it was just a couple of days ago, Jolie was like way higher than I wanted her to be when she came home. And she said, but I bolus for everything correctly. And I looked back in her history, which that's her privacy thing. She's like, don't look at my history. Because then I think, when I do, I'm like, you had 100 carbs between 9 and 11. What on earth were you? That was even before school lunch.
Right.
So that's why she doesn't want me to look at it. But I looked at it and I said, well, you counted for something at 230, 50 carbs, but you were at 160 and you didn't do a correction with that. Mm-hmm. Oh, I forgot that. So she does a really good job with most of it. But then I'm like, well, that's why you're even high, because that's a whole 3 units that you left out there.
I think that's a good solid base though. Like that she's counting the carbs and giving herself insulin. Like hopefully she'll figure the rest of it out, but at least she's doing it. You know what I mean?
She is. And I will say this morning I woke up and I said to her, Jolie, one day, not today, probably not in the next 5 years, but one day you're going to thank me, because last night I was up at midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. I did corrections every 2 hours last night, which is not the norm, especially now with Omnipod 5. But after Halloween, and it was a pump change last night, and everything went on.
Yeah.
Every 2 hours, I was giving her a correction, and our high alarm is set at 1:40 at night. So every time she went over 1:40, I was back in. I go to do a correction. I said, and one day you're going to have to do this yourself. And she said, well, how am I going to do that? And I was like, I don't know. And that, I will say that scares me. I don't know.
Figure that out later.
She doesn't have on any alarms. She doesn't have on anything. She doesn't pay attention to any of it. But I was like, at some point you're going to do it. But for now, just please know that I was up every 2 hours last night.
Maybe you can get her to set the alarms up on the during the summer, and like get herself accustomed to like saying, oh, I'm 140 or something. I should maybe pay attention to this, like that kind of an idea. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Because you're going to have to do it incrementally. Otherwise, you're going to be in that situation where you're ranting at her one day and you're like, you have to turn those alarms on. And like, it's not going to go well. Last night, it must have been the night. So poor Arden. I think poor Arden every time I say this, but Arden got her period yesterday. So she was wiped out. And she came back from her classes and she's like, she told me, we were texting in the morning, and boy, that she really knows how to cut it close. She had like, I think 4 units of insulin left in her pump, and she was at class. And I texted her and I was like, hey, when is class over? And she goes, I'll be back in my room in a half an hour. And I was like, okay. I'm like, you know that you need a pump, right? And she goes, yeah, I know. And I was like, okay. She goes, I'm either going to take a nap or do my homework when I get back. And I said, okay, well, for sure, change the pump. That's the first thing, no matter what you do.
And you have the ability to see how much she has on board with your system?
It's Night Scout. I can see how much insulin's in the pump on Night Scout. So she's like, okay, like I will. And she did. Like I could see that the pump suddenly had more insulin in it again. And she was a little high. She was like 140. And I was like, bolus, like, because, it's a new pump and right now the algorithm thinks it gave you enough. So like put in some extra insulin before you go do whatever you're going to do. She was cool. She was good all day. But last night, I couldn't tell if she was asleep or not. Like I could see the last time she ate and her blood sugar was good. And I texted her and I was like, hey, I lost your data. Like I don't see your Dexcom. And she doesn't answer. And I'm like, now am I bothering her or is she asleep? Because it's like 12:30. And I'm like, Arden, nothing. I'm like, let me wait a little while. It'll probably just come back on. Because I have to be honest, like we never have problems like that. Like no data and like stuff like that never happens. And so an hour into it, I'm like, hey, Ards, I texted her again. She didn't answer. I waited a little longer. So it's now been like 90 minutes with no data. And it eludes me for some reason that even though I can't see her number, I could see in Night Scout if she was still getting basal. Because if she was getting basal, then that means the algorithm sees her CGM number. And I was so tired, I forgot that. So I called her. She doesn't answer. She texts back, what? And I said, hey, I don't have any data from your Dexcom. And she goes, okay. And then I'm like, are you going to take care of it? Then I didn't hear from her again. Anyway, at 3:00 in the morning, I finally like lost my nerve about like just waiting for it to come back. And I called her and I woke her up and I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were up doing homework. Like it's a weird thing when your kids are in college, like 3:00 doing homework's not crazy. And she goes, no, I am asleep. And I was like, okay. I'm like, I don't have any data. And she goes, and I hear her phone click open and she goes, I have it. And I said, as long as your phone has it, I'm sorry I woke you up, go back to sleep. And then she just, and then like was gone. And, 2 seconds later, because something happened, like I got her to open her phone, I guess. And it all popped right back again. And all I could think when that was over was, I really wanted to go to fucking sleep 3 hours ago. And then I'm setting an alarm like to talk to you this morning. And I'm just like, oh God, like, am I going to be okay in the morning? Because I got like 5 hours of sleep. And I feel fine, but it's tomorrow that'll hit me now because I'm getting older. Like when I was younger, I would have been like, oh, this is fine. I could have stayed up for nights with diabetes in the past, but now it catches me. Like it really does.
No, my problem is I work nights, not like overnights, but I work in the evening. And that's when I start feeling like I'd rather be in bed and in my pajamas because I got 3 hours of sleep last night. But no, I have to function and talk to people. But
how old are you?
I am 40. I'm going to be 48 next week.
Wait till you see in the next handful of years. Like it won't be like I should sleep. It'll be like I'm going to sleep now. Goodbye. Like I don't.
Oh, I wish I could fall asleep that easily. But
do you have trouble sleeping?
I do. I have a lot of trouble sleeping.
What happens? Your mind races?
Yeah, my mind races. I'm staring at the friggin' sugar pixel. I'm all different things. I have to get up every 2 hours to do a correction. I think my body's just trained to be getting up so much now that I just don't sleep well.
Yeah. I have to admit the one thing people ask a lot about that I'm still shocked by is, when you were helping Arden, you were helping her, especially overnight, because I wasn't very involved in her diabetes for, the last maybe year and a half of high school. Like we were really letting her practice on herself basically before college. But overnight, it was still me. And when she left, there was part of me, I was like, she'll be home in a week. Like, I don't know how this is going to work. And then she said it on here. I asked her about it and she goes, well, yeah, once I was gone, like, it was like a don't die thing. So it seemed pretty important. So I take care of it myself now. And I was like, how do you do that? And she goes, I don't think I sleep as soundly as I used to. And I was like, oh, that's so sad. Okay. But she's probably right,
She's probably right. Yeah.
Anyway, did we miss anything? Oh, you fired your doctor, Jocelyn?
Oh, so it was interesting. So we went on the Omnipod 5 and I love Jocelyn. We have a fantastic nurse that was great and a doctor who we liked. And she went on the Omnipod 5. And it's funny. I feel like I sometimes go to doctor's appointments and ask them questions because I think it's what you're supposed to do, even though I already know the answers. So, and oftentimes I feel like I just know more than them. Thanks to you. We went to the doctor and I was like, I don't understand. And I feel like this still happens sometimes. If she's on the Omnipod 5, why is she stuck at 140? Like, why does she like a very straight, smooth line at 140 all night long? I don't understand why it's not still working to bring her down. And the doctor was like, oh, well, do you put her on, what's it called? Sleep mode? She said, do you put her on sleep mode? And I was like, Omnipod 5 doesn't have sleep mode.
Right.
She was like, oh, right. Then she was like, I was asking her some other questions and she said, well, do you use basal IQ? And I said, that's
different pump.
It's not on
different pump.
Not on Omnipod 5. Not on Omnipod 5 at all. And this is like our once a year doctor's appointment that we have with this doctor. I feel like we should get some attention and have her at least know what pump we use. And that was kind of that was it. And I was like, nope, not using a doctor who doesn't even know what our pump is.
I think if I had an endocrinologist who I said, I'm using Omnipod 5 and they started asking me about Control IQ or vice versa or anything else like that. And I said, no, you're thinking of the wrong pump, like giving them a shot to go, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. And then they still don't know about the system I'm using. I got to wonder, like they don't have a half an hour to learn about something they're talking about all day long.
She was like, oh, I've been dealing with T-Slim patients all day. I'm like, but that's fine. I'm not one of them. Like we are not a T-Slim patient. So I went back to Jocelyn and, our nurse, I said, what endo should we go to who has more knowledge on Omnipod 5. So we are now using an amazing doctor who was part of the trials.
Also, Sari, the bigger problem isn't that, in my opinion. The bigger problem is there's an answer for why you get a 140 stuck blood sugar on an algorithm. There's a way to handle that. And the answer isn't like, did you try flipping the switch? Some people use the sleep mode. The answer is, you've miscalculated something, the impact of food most likely, because the pump believes it has enough insulin. It's not giving you more or it's taking away your basal because it believes it's covered it. It doesn't want to make you low. It's not going to just decide. None of them are just going to decide, screw it. I'll ignore how much they told me they ate and I'll give more insulin. It'll do it slowly, but it's not going to do it aggressively. You have to look back and say, hey, you know what? This turns out this might have been 65 carbs and we said it was 55 carbs.
But what if it's during the night and it was so far past, like this morning at 4:00 in the morning, why was she still at 140, even though she had already come down and then drifted back up? I just don't understand that.
Something's pushing her blood sugar up.
So the past couple of weeks have been so tricky. She was really sick 2 weeks ago and I've been hesitant to change settings. She was really sick. So she was running higher. And then I was like, oh, maybe at some point we'll have to change settings. But then I was like, let's wait till she's not sick anymore and see if she goes back.
Illness, hormones, like.
Well, and now she's got her period. She's starting her period today or tomorrow. So I was like, well, we have to wait. But now I don't know if the illness has pushed her to need more insulin overall. So I think we might need to change her settings as a whole.
Omnipod 5 too is an example. Like if you're having less of a need Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and all of a sudden on Friday the need's greater, it's kind of considering Wednesday, Thursday, and that could be another issue too. Like, so there's a reason, but wouldn't it be interesting to hear the doctor talk through those reasons?
The doctor, yes, doctor would be helpful. Yep.
And not have to wait for me to say it. Yep. It's ridiculous. Anyway, to all you doctors out there that don't know what you're doing, thank you. I have a very successful podcast because of your ineptitude, and I appreciate it. Thank you. It's fascinating. I literally, if they knew what they were doing, wouldn't have a job.
Right.
So, and not that some of them aren't fantastic, because a lot of them are. Probably, let's be honest, overwhelmingly, they're probably great. But there's enough sprinkled through there that people end up having issues like this, and they have to go other places to look for information.
And there's something to be said for the doctors who do the work all day long and know so much and learn so much, but still don't live with it.
Yeah.
It's just different. It's just different when you're living with it.
I had this kind of epiphany on Sunday. So I went to Austin and did this talk for the JDRF in Austin. And it was Jenny and I. And instead of Jenny and I's idea was like, at these events, people show up for 30 minutes. Usually they stand behind a lectern. They put a slideshow behind them and they say some crap that you're just like, this is boring and I'm not paying attention to any of this. And like, it sucks. And we said, well, if we're in control of what we're doing, like, we don't want to do that. So we just kind of like almost like Smartless on the Road style, put like you said you were a podcast person, so I figured you knew that reference. So we put 2 chairs on a stage, put a table in between us, sat down, 2 hours. We just talked about stuff and then sent everyone to lunch. By the way, for people who have put on events and know the pain that no one comes back after lunch, everyone returned after lunch. And then we did 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. 3 straight solid hours. We did Q&A stuff. And not like little bull crap stuff. Like we did long, deep conversations about everybody's questions. And what struck me, the epiphany I had at the end was we could have sat there and done that for 10 hours. When you have somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, it's interesting how easy it is to disseminate the information. It's when you have a doctor who's like, I'm a doctor, I know what I'm talking about. Then you realize they don't know the difference between 2 different pumps. Those are the people you're having stand up at these events and read slideshows to people. And that's why no one's getting anywhere. I guarantee you the people now, actually one woman left that room, and these people were listeners too, by the way. They were podcast listeners already. And a person got online and said, just being in the room and hearing the conversations, look at this graph for my daughter. We were already doing well, but look how much better this went just because I had a refresher and ideas were in my head and stuff like that. So anyway, it's doable. You have to find people who are willing to let those kind of events happen. I don't think you're going to see it mostly. Although between you and I, because this isn't going to come out for a long time, I'll slip this in here.
Come to Boston.
I think one of the companies I do business with is going to do like a live event tour with me next year. I think we might go to a bunch of different cities and do stuff like that. So fingers crossed that makes it through the marketing meetings and everybody thinks it's a good idea.
And that you come to Boston.
Yeah, Boston would be great. I think Chicago's on the list. Probably Philly, DC. Like, going to try to keep me so I'm not like, I don't die flying all over the country. But we'll probably pick a West Coast location. And
come on, you've got an empty nest. What else are you doing?
Well, every time I leave the house, my wife gets sick. I was gone for 2 days and I get this text, I have pneumonia. I'm like, pneumonia? What are we, 90? I was like, what's going on? So she has some long COVID symptoms and then got around a person with a chest infection and didn't realize it. And so now she's in the other room sleeping off pneumonia along with a bunch of medication. So anyway, if I leave, she's going to get diphtheria next or something.
Take her with you.
I tried to get her to come.
Somebody's got to work.
Yeah. Well, no, but somebody's got to pay these. I got bills. I still got a kid in college. I was like, you get in there and make money. Anyway, anything we didn't go over or anything that we missed?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything plus more.
Cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You were terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah, hold on
this
1 second.
This has been great.
Oh, did you have a good time?
It was great. I was nervous, but I'm glad we did it. I'm glad I was able to see you and chat with you in real face to face.
What were you nervous about?
Oh, I don't know. Just saying dumb things or not sounding good. Although I won't know that until I hear it. You
didn't say anything dumb. Okay. Don't worry about that. You gave a really good example of being direct with people and not apologizing for how you feel or what you need. And I think a lot of people could use that lesson once in a while. So I think that was really terrific. Plus, we'll get to find out one day about Jolie and if she's actually if she's actually having a cupcake when she's telling you it's a salad. That's all I thought that one time.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
Okay. Hold on 1 second for me. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. Mark is an incredible example of what so many experience living with diabetes. You show up for yourself and others every day, never letting diabetes define you. And that is what the Medtronic Champion community is all about. Each of us is strong, and together we're even stronger. To hear more stories from the Medtronic Champion community or to share your own story, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox. Don't forget, we still have Mark's conversation at the very end. It's a terrific kind of mini episode, about 10 minutes long, that goes deeper into some of the things that you heard Mark talking about earlier in the show. A huge thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Don't forget, usmed.com/juicebox. This is where we get our diabetes supplies from. You can as well. Use the link or call 888-721-1514. Use the link or call the number, get your free benefits check so that you can start getting your diabetes supplies the way we do from US Med. And now my full conversation with Medtronic Champion, Mark. Mark, how old were you when you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes?
I was 28.
28. How old are you now?
47.
47. So just about 20 years?
Yeah, 19 years.
What was your management style when you were diagnosed?
I used injections for about 6 months, and then my endocrinologist in the Navy recommended a pump.
How long had you been in the Navy?
Let's see, 8 years up to that point.
8 years.
Yeah.
I've interviewed a number of people who have been diagnosed during service, and most of the time they're discharged. What happened to you?
I was medically discharged. Yeah, 6 months after my diagnosis.
I don't understand the whole system. Is that like honorable?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, if you get a medical discharge, you get a commensurate honorable discharge. I guess there could be cases where something other than that, but that's really how it happens. So it's an honorable discharge but because of medical reasons.
And that still gives you access to the VA for the rest of your life, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Do you use the VA for your management?
Yeah, I used to up until a few years ago when we moved to North Carolina. It just became untenable. Mm-hmm. Just the rigmarole and process to kind of get all the things I needed, for diabetes management. It was far easier just to go through a private practice.
Was it your goal to stay in the Navy for your whole life, your career?
It was. Yeah. In fact, I think a few months before my diagnosis, my wife and I had that discussion about, staying in for the long term. And, we'd made the decision despite all the hardships and time away from home. That was what we loved the most. So that's what made it that much more difficult.
Was the Navy a lifetime goal of yours or something you came to as an adult?
Lifetime goal. I mean, as my earliest childhood memories were flying, being a fighter pilot, and specifically being flying on and off aircraft carriers. So, watching Top Gun in the 80s certainly was a catalyst for that.
You've taken off and landed a jet on an aircraft carrier?
Hundreds of times.
Is there anything in life as exhilarating as that?
No, but there's a roller coaster I rode at, I think it's Cedar Rapids up in Cleveland, Sandusky. And they've got this roller coaster that takes you from 0 to, I think it's like 80 or something. You go up a big hill and you come right back down. So the acceleration is pretty similar, I would say, to a catapult shot.
I'm going to guess you own a Tesla.
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I'm a boring guy. I got a hybrid RAV4. I get made fun of. I get called, my wife says I drive like a grandpa. I'm a 5 miles per hour over the speed limit person, no more than that. So yeah, in the car, I'm boring, Scott.
So you've never felt a need to try to replace that with something else?
You can't replace it. It's irreplaceable.
That's what I thought.
So up until the point where someone, buys me an F-18 or allows me to get inside a 2-seater and fly it, you can't replace it.
How did it make you feel when you saw, or maybe you haven't seen, a gentleman named Pietro has his large aircraft license. He's flying for a major carrier now. He has type 1 diabetes. Does that feel hopeful to you?
Yeah, it does. When I was diagnosed, that wasn't a possibility. The FAA prohibited commercial pilots who had type 1 diabetes. But I think it was 2017 when they changed their rules to allow type 1 diabetics to be commercial pilots. And part of the reason they did that was because of the technology advancements, specifically in pump therapy and pump management. So I don't have any aspirations of going to the commercial airlines, but one of my sons who has type 1 diabetes very much wants to be a commercial pilot. So, in that respect, I'm very hopeful and thankful.
Yeah. Do you fly privately now for pleasure?
I do. Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is fly my kids to the different soccer tournaments I have all over the Southeast U.S. So last week, my wife and I and 2 of our boys flew up to Richmond for their soccer tournaments up there. And Charlie, who's my middle child, has type 1 diabetes. So, if I can combine flying, family, and football in one weekend, to me, I think I've just achieved Valhalla.
So then it sounds to me like this diagnosis was a significant course correction for you. Can you tell me how it affected your dream?
Well, I guess 3 words come to mind. First, it was devastating. Everything I had done in life, everything I'd worked up to that point was just taken away in an instant. And I was not prepared for that at all. The second emotion it was scary. I hadn't thought much about life outside the Navy, certainly not life as anything else but a fighter pilot. And Heather and I were getting ready to move to France. I was going to do an exchange tour with the French Naval Air Force. So we were taking French classes. So pretty quickly, I had to reinvent myself. And then probably the most important thing at the same time that all that was going on, I had to learn how to deal with type 1 diabetes and how to manage it effectively. The third thing that pops into my mind, I guess, is challenging. New daily routines I had to establish, first with injections and then eventually, through pump management. And then learning how to count carbs and recognize highs and lows, how my body reacts to blood sugar trends based on exercise and stress and those types of things. And my goal at that time, and it still is today, is to leverage technology and make sure my habit patterns are effective so that I take diabetes management from the forefront to the background.
Have you had success with that? Do you feel like you've made the transition well?
I have. I believe in continuous improvement, so there's always more to do. I will say the technology since I was diagnosed, specifically with pump management, it's just incredible. It takes less of me intervening, and it's really done by the pump itself and by the algorithms through the CGMs. And to me, again, that should be the goal for everybody, is to not have to focus so much on the daily aspects of type 1 diabetes management. We should let technology do that for us.
What else have you found valuable? I've spoken to thousands of people with type 1 diabetes. The one thing that took me by surprise, because I don't have type 1 myself and my daughter was very young when she was diagnosed, I didn't really understand until I launched this podcast, and then it grew into this kind of big Facebook presence. I heard people say, I don't know anybody else who has type 1 diabetes. I wish I knew more people. But until I saw them come together, I didn't recognize how important it was.
Yeah, I think similarly, I didn't know anyone with type 1 diabetes growing up as an adult up until when I was diagnosed. And then all of a sudden, people just came out of the woodwork. And when CGMs first hit the market, certainly within the last 5 years, it's amazing to me and my family how many people we've noticed with type 1 diabetes simply because you can see the CGM on their arm. I would say a month does not go by where we don't run into someone at a restaurant or an amusement park or a sporting event or somewhere where we see somebody else with type 1 diabetes. And the other surprising aspect of that is just how quickly you make friends. And I'll give an example. We were at a soccer tournament up in Raleigh this past Saturday and Sunday, and the referee came over to my son Charlie at the end of the game and said, "Hey, I noticed you were wearing a pump." And he lifted up his shirt and showed his pump as well and said, "I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 9 years old. I played soccer in college. I'm sure that's your aspiration. And I just want to tell you, don't let type 1 diabetes ever stop you from achieving your dreams of what you want to do. And this gentleman was probably in his, late 50s or 60s. So just having that connection and seeing, the outreach and people's willingness to share their experiences, it just means the world to us and just makes us feel like we're part of a strong community.
Yeah. So would you say that the most important things are strong technology, tools, understanding how to manage yourself, and a connection to others?
Yeah, technology for sure, and knowing how to leverage it. And then the community, and that community is your friends, your family, caregivers, for me, the Medtronic Champions community, all those resources that are out there to, help guide the way, but then help you keep abreast on, the new things that are coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
And to give you hope for eventually, that we can find a cure.
You mentioned that your son wanted to be a pilot. He also has type 1 diabetes. How old was he when he was diagnosed?
So Henry was diagnosed when he was 12 years old. It was just at the start of COVID. We were actually visiting my in-laws in Tennessee. We woke up in the morning and he had wet his bed. And several years before that, we had all 4 of our boys tested for TrialNet. So, predictor of whether or not they were going to develop type 1 diabetes. And Henry and one of his brothers tested positive for a lot of the indicators. So we always kind of had an inclination that there was a high degree of possibility he would develop it. But we always had it in the back of our mind as well. And so when that event happened at the beginning of COVID, we had him take his blood sugar on my glucometer, and it was over 400. And so right away, we knew that without even being diagnosed properly by an endocrinologist, that he was a type 1 diabetic. So we hurried home to get him properly diagnosed in Charlottesville. And then we just started the process, first grieving, but then acceptance and, his eventual becoming part of the team that nobody wants to join.
How old is he now?
Yeah, he's 15 years old now.
When's the first time he came to you and said, is this going to stop me from flying?
Almost immediately. So like me, he always had aspirations of flying. In fact, he, out of all 4 boys, wanted to be in the military. And that was a difficult part of the conversation and maybe something that we don't talk about as a community. But there are some things you cannot do as a type 1 diabetic. And that's a hard fact of life. And unfortunately, joining the military is one of those hard and fast things. You cannot join the military as a type 1 diabetic. So that was very difficult for him and for me and my wife to get over. Then we also started talking about being a commercial pilot. And so I saw that same excitement in his eyes because like me, he can be in an F-18 or a 737 or a Cirrus SR-20 that I fly and be just as happy. Yeah. So he still has that passion today and still very much plans to eventually become a commercial pilot.
I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you. You have 4 children. Do any others have type 1?
They do. My oldest twin, Henry, has type 1 diabetes, and my middle son, Charlie, has type 1 diabetes as well.
The boys are twins.
The oldest 2 are twins. One has type 1 diabetes. My middle son, who is not a twin, has type 1 diabetes.
I see. Is there any other autoimmune in your family?
There isn't. I'm really the only person in my family or my wife's family that we know of with any sort of autoimmune disease, certainly type 1 diabetes. So unfortunately, I was the first to strike it rich and unfortunately pass it along to 2 of my sons.
But celiac, thyroid, anything like that?
Nothing. We're really a pretty healthy family. So this came out of nowhere for myself and for my 2 sons.
That's really something. I appreciate your time very much, and I appreciate you sharing this with me. Thank you very much.
Anytime, Scott.
Learn more about the Medtronic Champion community at medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox or by searching the hashtag Medtronic Champion on your favorite social media platform. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.